My father waited until the dessert plates were cleared and the servers had stepped back against the paneled walls. The ballroom at the Norfolk Yacht Club glowed in deliberate gold. Crystal glasses caught the light. Silverware lay aligned like ceremonial tools. Conversations moved in controlled currents, polite and self-aware. The Atlantic was only a few streets away, but inside the hall, everything felt insulated from weather. I stood near the rear column, hands folded behind my back. Navy dress blues, ribbons precise, shoes polished to a level that required patience, not pride. My father adjusted the microphone with 2 fingers. He always liked to create small pauses before speaking, as if silence were something he granted to others. "Family," he began, smiling into the room. "It's a complicated thing." A ripple of laughter, warm and compliant. He spoke about generosity, about second chances, about building futures that correct the past. He gestured toward Megan, who sat 2 tables from the front, her posture upright, chin slightly lowered in controlled modesty. "My stepdaughter," he said, voice thick with approval, "the only daughter worth being proud of." Applause, immediate, relieved. "And then," he added lightly, "there are mistakes from the past." He turned his head just enough for his gaze to brush over me. It was not a long look. It didn't need to be. Rooms like this understand implication. They don't require names. I did not move. The sound of applause continued for a few seconds longer than necessary. People prefer momentum to discomfort. Megan smiled gently, as if she wished the comparison had never been made. That was part of her talent. She knew how to accept advantage without appearing to claim it. I had known her since she was 16. I had watched her study people the way others study manuals. She learned quickly which expressions produced sympathy, which tones suggested competence, which silence created intrigue. I had learned different things. I grew up in a coastal town in North Carolina where the air tasted faintly of salt and engine oil. Our house sat low against the marsh, wood siding faded by sun and wind. Storm shutters rattled every autumn. The Atlantic did not negotiate. It arrived on its own schedule. My father believed in visibility. He believed that to be important, you had to be seen. I learned early that to survive, you had to observe. When I was 12, I watched him humiliate a dock worker in front of neighbors for miscalculating a delivery time. He did not shout. He spoke evenly, almost kindly, while dismantling the man's competence piece by piece. The crowd laughed at the appropriate moments. I remember the dock worker's hands. They were steady. He did not defend himself. That steadiness stayed with me. When my mother died during my final year of high school, the house became louder, not quieter. Grief made my father restless. He filled space with commentary, with correction, with assessment. "You have to be stronger," he told me the night after the funeral. "No one respects fragility." I nodded. 2 months later, I signed my enlistment contract with the United States Navy. I did not announce it during dinner. I placed the papers on his desk in the study. He found them there the next morning. "You won't last," he said without looking up. "I will," I answered. That was the last argument we had for years. The Navy did not ask me to be impressive. It asked me to be precise, to memorize procedures, to execute them under conditions that did not tolerate ego. Precision suited me. Basic training stripped noise away. The instructors shouted, but their volume had structure. There was purpose behind correction. If you failed, you were told why. If you improved, the improvement stood on its own. I advanced quietly. Navigation, systems, tactical coordination. On night exercises, I found clarity. Darkness simplified hierarchy. You either knew your position or you didn't. You either understood the sea or it took you. I learned to read storm fronts before radar confirmed them, to calculate margins without hesitation, to recognize when an order, though legal, would cost more than it saved. Promotion came gradually. Lieutenant, lieutenant commander, commander. Each new insignia arrived in rooms without chandeliers, fluorescent lighting, formal language, documentation signed in duplicate. Respect did not come with applause, it came with responsibility. Back in the ballroom, Megan was speaking now. She had been invited to share remarks about her assignment in Washington. "Headquarters is different," she said. "It's where decisions are shaped before anyone else sees them." Her voice carried well, controlled, confident. Several guests nodded. I knew her personnel record. I knew the letter of counseling issued after a logistics discrepancy 2 years prior. I knew the recommendation for remedial oversight that had been reframed publicly as a strategic reassignment. I knew the internal audit that never reached formal review because someone higher had intervened. Files tell stories, people don't. I did not look at her. My father watched her the way men watch successful investments, with satisfaction, not affection. "And of course," he added when she finished, "not everyone is suited for visibility. Some people prefer background roles." The room laughed again. I felt the familiar tightening along my spine. Not anger, calibration. Humiliation in public settings follows a pattern. It depends on speed. If you react quickly, you confirm the accusation. If you defend yourself, you validate the stage. So I stood still. A server passed behind me carrying a tray of champagne. The faint scent of citrus and salt drifted through the open terrace doors. Outside, the wind had shifted. Norfolk storms roll in low over the water. You can smell them before you see them. I checked my watch. 21:07 hours. The Atlantic would be restless tonight. My father concluded his remarks with a toast to the daughters who make the right choices. Glasses rose. I did not lift mine. I thought of the first time I stood on a bridge at night. The deck slick beneath my boots, radio traffic sharp in my ear. I thought of the weight of command when lives move according to your timing. In rooms like this, my father believed he commanded perception. He had never understood the difference between appearance and authority. The applause faded. Conversations resumed. No one approached me. That was fine. Distance is a form of control. I stepped away from the column and moved toward the terrace doors. The night air was cooler than I expected. The water beyond the marina lay dark and unsettled. Behind me, laughter continued. Inside, the music resumed, light and agreeable. Storm systems build quietly. So do decisions. I will continue with the storm on Route 58 in the next part. Before I do, tell me. When humiliation is offered publicly, do you believe silence is weakness or preparation? If this story holds your attention, stay with me. Route 58 disappears first at the shoulders. The asphalt vanishes under black water that looks shallow until it isn't. Streetlights bend in the wind. Rain moves sideways. Headlights float like uncertain stars. The call came at 0213. "Commander Morgan, stand down." The voice over the radio was clipped, controlled. Captain Chesapeake did not repeat himself often. We were already airborne. The storm cell had formed faster than predicted. Barometric pressure dropped 12 millibars in less than an hour. Coastal flooding reports were stacking across the board. Civilian emergency services were overwhelmed. "Stand down," he repeated. "Primary tasking rescinded. Return to base." I watched the radar bloom in green and red. I watched the coastline dissolve into static. "Copy," I answered. I did not change course. Orders exist within context. Context changes. "Commander, acknowledge directive," Chesapeake said again, sharper now. I reached forward and lowered the volume on the open channel. Not off, just low enough. The helicopter shuddered as we crossed the shoreline. My co-pilot glanced at me but said nothing. He had flown with me long enough to recognize calculation. Below us, Route 58 was no longer a road. It was a narrow ribbon swallowed by Atlantic surge. Vehicles sat abandoned at odd angles. One SUV had been pushed nearly perpendicular to the guardrail. Thermal imaging cut through rain. 3 heat signatures, clustered, not inside a vehicle, further out. "Buoy," my crew chief said quietly. A navigational buoy had torn loose from its anchor and drifted inland with the surge. Someone was clinging to it. Wind gusts pushed us 10 degrees off axis. I corrected, steady. "Fuel margin?" I asked. "Acceptable," my co-pilot answered. We descended carefully. Rotor wash battered the water into chaotic spirals. I held altitude at 30 feet. Too low and we'd destabilize. Too high and the hoist line would swing uncontrolled. Through night vision, I saw them clearly. A woman gripping the buoy with both arms, a child wrapped against her chest, a man half submerged, one hand locked around the chain. The man's movements were slowing. "Hoist ready," the crew chief called. "Make it clean," I said. The first lift was the child, lightweight, unconscious but breathing. The medic pulled him inside and began assessment without commentary. Second lift, the woman. She did not look up at the aircraft. She kept her eyes on the water as if expecting it to reclaim her. The man nearly slipped before the hook secured him. When he was inside, he collapsed against the deck, coughing water that smelled like oil and salt. "Identity?" I asked over intercom. The medic hesitated. "Sir, that's Admiral Whitaker." I looked down at the man's face. I recognized him. Admiral Daniel Whitaker had chaired the review board that approved my last operational expansion. He had asked 3 questions, all of them precise. His wife and son were now strapped into our cabin, shivering under thermal blankets. The radio crackled again. "Commander Morgan, report status immediately." I raised the volume. 3 civilians recovered, I said evenly. "Returning to base." There was a pause long enough to measure. "You were ordered to stand down." "Yes, sir." Another pause. "Fuel?" "Within margin." Silence. "Proceed." The word came reluctantly. We landed at 0318. Emergency crews took custody of the Whitakers. The Admiral remained conscious long enough to look at me once. Recognition flickered. No words. By dawn, the storm had moved north. At 0900, I was called into Chesapeake's office. He did not ask me to sit. "You disregarded a direct order." "Yes, sir." "You risked asset integrity." "Yes, sir." "You saved 3 lives." "Yes, sir." He studied me for several seconds. "Explain your decision." "Samaritan principle," I said. "Imminent loss of civilian life. Immediate capacity to intervene. Acceptable risk threshold." He leaned back slightly. "That's not doctrine." "It is now," I answered. He did not smile. 2 weeks later, a memorandum circulated fleet-wide. The Samaritan Directive. Authorization for commanders to intervene in life-threatening civilian scenarios when risk analysis supported action beyond primary tasking. It was written in neutral language. No names attached. Policies do not applaud. They simply exist. Back at the Norfolk charity dinner, Megan described her position at headquarters as strategic proximity. She spoke about influence. I thought about that night on Route 58. Influence is not proximity to power. It is the willingness to accept responsibility when power hesitates. I did not share that thought. Megan laughed at something one of the donors said. Her glass caught the light. She looked composed. I knew that 6 months earlier she had received a formal warning for bypassing procedural clearance during a procurement review. The documentation had been sealed quietly. Her transfer to headquarters had followed soon after. My father believed proximity equaled superiority. He had never understood the cost of command. Inside the ballroom, the music shifted to something slower. Guests moved toward the dance floor. I remained near the terrace doors. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. A message from base. New assignment pending. I read it once. Locked the screen. Behind me, Megan's voice carried again. "Some of us," she said lightly, "prefer to shape outcomes from the center." I did not turn. Centers collapse when foundations are weak. Outside, lightning stitched briefly across the horizon. Storm systems leave debris long after headlines fade. So do choices. I would return to the hall shortly, not to argue, to stand. Before that, I allowed myself one controlled breath of Atlantic air, salt, metal, ozone. Preparation has a rhythm, and mine was steady. I did not rush back inside. Storm air lingers even after the lightning moves north. It leaves a metallic taste along the tongue. It sharpens the edges of thought. Through the terrace glass, I could see my father moving from table to table, hand on shoulders, smile restored. He had already recalibrated the room. He always did. Humiliation for him was a performance. Once delivered, he moved on. I checked the alignment of my jacket once, not out of vanity, habit. When I stepped back into the ballroom, no one announced it. Music continued. Glassware clinked. The donors who mattered most were clustered near the front. I did not return to the rear column. I walked directly down the center aisle between tables, shoes striking marble in measured rhythm. Conversations faltered one by one. It happens gradually at first. A half-second pause, a glance, then another. Dress blues are not loud. They are structured. Authority without decoration. Someone near the second table straightened in his chair. I recognized him from previous fleet briefings, a civilian contractor with clearance access. He recognized the insignia before he recognized me. Whispers move faster than announcements. By the time I reached the open space near the podium, the music had thinned into uncertainty. The band did not stop. They simply reduced volume. My father turned. For a fraction of a second, he looked confused, as if trying to understand why attention had shifted without his direction. I stopped at a respectful distance from him, not confrontational, not deferential, present. Megan's expression changed first. Her smile tightened. Her eyes moved to my collar, then to my chest ribbons. "She's my commander," she said under her breath. It was not meant for the microphone. It carried anyway. Several guests near her table heard it. Heads turned fully now. My father's posture stiffened. "You decided to join us," he said lightly, attempting recovery. "I was already here," I answered. My tone was even, no inflection sharp enough to cut. A retired flag officer seated near the front rose slowly to his feet. Recognition settled across his face. He inclined his head slightly. "Commander Carter," he said. The use of my name, properly spoken, altered the room more than any speech could. Others followed the cue. Subtle. Chairs straightening, shoulders adjusting. Respect in formal spaces is rarely dramatic. It is structural. Once it begins, it reorganizes everything. My father glanced at Megan. She did not meet his eyes. He cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "it's good to see initiative." I stepped closer to the podium, but I did not take the microphone from him. "I would like to add something," I said. Not loudly. He hesitated. Public refusal would have been obvious. Public permission appeared gracious. He stepped back half a pace. I adjusted the microphone slightly lower, not because I needed to, because it established alignment. "Tonight is about service," I began, "and accountability." The room was quiet now, not strained, focused. "Service," I continued, "is not proximity to power. It is responsibility under pressure. It is making decisions when they are inconvenient. It is accepting consequences when they are necessary." I did not look at my father. I did not look at Megan. "Accountability," I said, "is quieter. It doesn't announce itself. It is documented. It is measured. It endures." Several eyes shifted toward Megan involuntarily, not because I directed them, because truth creates gravity. I have had the privilege of serving with individuals who understood that authority is not performance, it is stewardship. A pause. In uniform, mistakes are not humiliations. They are recorded, addressed, corrected. The band members had stopped entirely now. I did not raise my voice. "I am proud to serve," I said, "and I am proud of every individual in this room who understands that dignity is not granted by comparison." Silence. No applause yet. I stepped back from the microphone. That was all. My father opened his mouth as if to respond, then closed it. There was nothing in what I had said that he could challenge without exposing himself. The retired flag officer began clapping first, not loudly. Others followed. The applause built slowly, not explosive, sustained. Megan remained seated. Her posture was still composed, but her hands had tightened around her glass. My father did not look at me. He looked at the room. For the first time that evening, he was not directing it. He was responding to it. I returned the microphone to its stand and stepped away. I did not linger near the podium. I did not seek conversations. People approached me regardless. Measured handshakes, direct eye contact, short acknowledgments. "Commander, thank you. Good to see you." No one mentioned the earlier comment. They did not need to. Public correction does not require accusation. It requires presence. After several minutes, I felt the shift settle permanently. The room had recalibrated around fact. Megan stood eventually and approached. Her voice was low. "I didn't know you were overseeing that directive," she said. "You didn't ask," I replied. She held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. There was calculation there, and something else. Awareness. "I'll see you at briefing next month," she said. "Yes," I answered. She stepped away. My father did not approach me again that night. When the music resumed, it was different. Quieter, more careful. I remained for another hour, long enough that my departure would not appear abrupt. When I finally stepped outside again, the storm had fully passed. The air was clean. Inside, reputation had shifted. No shouting, no confrontation, no spectacle, just structure reasserted. In uniform, you learn that dignity is not something you argue for. It is something you maintain. And once maintained in public, it alters memory. In the next part, months later, there will be a ceremony at Mayport. Tell me, have you ever corrected someone without speaking their name? If this story resonates, stay with me. Naval Station Mayport sits low against the water, concrete, steel, salt. The ceremony was scheduled for 900. By 8:45, the chairs were aligned in clean rows across the hangar floor, flags positioned at measured intervals. The air carried the faint smell of oil and Atlantic wind. I arrived early. Dress uniform again, white this time, insignia precise, shoes reflecting the overhead lights. Promotion ceremonies are not emotional events. They are administrative acknowledgments, orders read aloud, rank adjusted, responsibility expanded. I stood near the rear of the formation while junior officers completed final checks. Months had passed since the Norfolk dinner. The Samaritan Directive had been adopted fleet-wide. After-action reviews cited it without commentary. Its language had been integrated into operational manuals. It no longer belonged to a single night on Route 58. It belonged to structure. Megan had attended 2 briefings under my oversight since then. She arrived on time. She took notes. She did not reference the charity dinner. Correction, when handled properly, does not require repetition. I saw my father before he saw me. He stood near the entrance, hands clasped in front of him, suit darker than usual. No microphone this time, no audience curated by him. He looked smaller against the scale of the hangar. Civilian guests are permitted at promotion ceremonies. It is a courtesy extended to family. I had not extended an invitation personally. The invitation had come from base protocol. He noticed me then. For a moment, we simply regarded each other across the polished concrete. No immediate approach. At 900 precisely, the ceremony began. The commanding officer stepped forward. Orders were read. My record summarized in measured language. Years of service compressed into paragraphs. Storm response. Operational readiness. Personnel oversight. Directive development. The language was neutral, official. That neutrality felt appropriate. When my new insignia was presented, I adjusted it myself. No one else touched it. Applause followed, structured, contained. I stepped back into position. After the formalities concluded, guests were allowed to approach. My father waited. He did not push forward immediately. He allowed others to speak first. Former crew members shook my hand. Junior officers offered congratulations. A civilian liaison from headquarters nodded once, formally. Eventually, the space cleared. My father stepped forward. Up close, I could see the lines along his jaw more clearly. Age does not ask permission. "Emily," he said. "Not Commander, not mistake. Emily." I inclined my head slightly. He hesitated. In public settings, he had always known exactly what to say. Here, he searched. "My daughter," he said finally. "Officer Emily Carter." The words were simple, unadorned. They did not come with applause. No microphone amplified them, but several individuals nearby heard. Enough. He extended his hand. I accepted it. His grip was firm, but not performative. There was no embrace, no dramatic reconciliation. He did not apologize. I did not require him to. Correction spoken aloud is sometimes sufficient. "I read about the directive," he added quietly. "It was effective." "Yes," I answered. A pause. "You chose your path," he said. "I did." He nodded once. For the first time in years, there was no comparison in his expression, no weighing of daughters, no assessment of visibility, only acknowledgement. We stood in silence for several seconds. Silence is not empty when it is chosen. He stepped back first. "I won't keep you," he said. "You're not," I replied. He turned toward the exit without further commentary. I watched him leave the hangar and step into the bright Florida light. There was no sudden warmth inside me, no surge of relief. Closure is quieter than that. It is the absence of pressure. I remained on base for the remainder of the afternoon, reviewing transition documents and scheduling briefings for the coming quarter. Work continues regardless of family dynamics. As the sun lowered over Mayport, I walked alone along the edge of the pier. The Atlantic was calmer here than it had been on Route 58 months earlier, surface steady, depths unchanged. I thought about the charity dinner, about the microphone, about the phrase, "mistake from the past." Past does not dissolve simply because someone renames it, but it can be corrected, not with confrontation, with record, with rank, with presence. My father had spoken 3 words that morning: my daughter, Officer Emily Carter. They were enough. I did not need more. The wind moved lightly across the water. A gull landed briefly on the railing beside me, then lifted again. Control is not dominance. It is alignment. I turned back toward the hangar as evening settled. There would be another storm someday, another directive, another decision that required quiet calculation. That is the path I chose. Not visible, not loud, steady. When someone who once diminished you finally names you correctly, what changes? Them or you? If this story felt familiar, you're welcome to share your thoughts. And if you value stories about quiet authority and earned dignity, stay with me.